Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to see you all again, and I hope you're enjoying the summit so far. If you're just tuning in with us today, my name is Liz Hasenmueller, and I'm the Associate Director of the Water Institute at St. Louis University. And I'm also an Associate Professor in the Department of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences in the College of Arts and Sciences. So I want to thank everyone for joining us for our third annual SLU Summit for Water Resources in a Changing Climate. And before we begin with today's panel, I want to remind you to submit your questions to the panelists using our Q&A function to the right-hand side of your screen. If you have a question for a specific panelist, please include that panelist name with your question, and that way we can direct your question to the appropriate panelist. When we get to the end of our panel, we're going to have a few questions to begin with, and then we'll open it up for audience questions, which is when you can reach out to the various panelists. So I'm really excited to moderate our next panel, From Research to Impact, Academia and Our Changing Climate, which brings together 3 regional leaders working with water in academic spaces. Each of the panelists will provide some introductory remarks before we open it up for the discussion and questions. To get us started, I want to introduce Dr. Jason He. Dr. He is a professor in the Department of Energy, Environmental, and Chemical Engineering at Washington University in St. Louis. His research focuses on sustainable water and wastewater treatment as well as resource recovery. At WashU, he's directing the Center for Water Innovation, and Dr. He has published 240 journal papers and was recognized as a 2018 highly cited research by the Clarivate Analytics. He received a Walter L. Huber Civil Engineering Research Prize from ASCE, Green Talent Award from BMBF in Germany, and the Dean's Award for Research Excellence at Virginia Tech. He's the editor-in-chief for both the Journal of Hazardous Materials and Water Environment Research. And in 2020, Dr. He was named a fellow of the International Water Association. Thank you for joining us today, Jason. If you could you please share a few opening remarks about yourself and your expertise in water-related issues?
All right, Liz, thank you very much for the nice introduction. So it's my great pleasure to participate in this panel and had a chance to discuss with 2 of my colleagues about a very important issue, water and climate. As Liz introduced, I'm currently a professor of environmental engineering at WashU. Before WashU, I was a professor at Virginia Tech. So coming from China and currently working in the United States, really allow me to get a better understanding about these 2 countries that play a very important role in both environmental protection and climate change, and also spend a very brief time in Europe, 2 years in Denmark to complete my master's study. So that gave me a chance to see Europe, which has some difference from both China and the United States. So I've been working on wastewater treatment, particularly wastewater treatment, for many years. My interest is in technological solutions to address water pollution issues. Obviously, water is not an isolated issue. So you might have heard of the words like nexus of water energy, water, food, and access. Now we add climate into this picture. So that really determines my research to go beyond the treatment of water pollution. A key focus of my research is now on resource recovery, because in wastewater, there's a lot of potentially valuable resources we can recover, such as energy, nutrient, and water. So in my view, the biggest resource in wastewater is water itself. So if we can recover those valuable resources through a cost-effective technology solution, we can possibly reduce greenhouse gas emission associated with the production of the new resource. So we've been working on various technology and looking to try to understand what would be the best way to recover those valuable resources. I think that's a lot of introduction. I'll go back to Liz.
Thank you so much, Jason. Our next panelist is Dr. David Borrok. Dr. Borrok received his bachelor's degree in geology at Missouri S&T and earned his master's degree in economic geology from the University of Michigan. He followed this up with about 5 years in industry, including time as a project scientist and site manager for Black & Veatch. Dr. Borrok went back to get his Ph.D. specializing in geomicrobiology and geochemistry at the University of Notre Dame. And then he accepted a position as a Mendenhall postdoctoral fellow at the U.S. Geological Survey in Denver, Colorado, before moving to an academic position at the University of Texas at El Paso. As an assistant and then associate professor at UTEP, Dr. Borrok specialized in water resources and formed and directed the University Center for Environmental and Earth and Environmental Isotope Research. He moved to the University of Louisiana at Lafayette in 2012 to become the inaugural director of the School of Geosciences. There, he developed a research group dedicated to addressing the challenges of coastal water management. And then he joined Missouri S&T in August of 2017, where he currently serves as the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Engineering and Computing. Dr. Borrok has published more than 60 articles and has been the PI or co-PI on more than $9 million of funding, largely from federal sources like the National Science Foundation. We're really grateful to have you here with us today, David. And with that, I'll hand it over to you to give some opening remarks about you and your work.
Sure, thanks. I am happy to be here today, and thanks for having me on the panel. So I'm thinking about the title of this panel. I was thinking about all the different sorts of water challenges we have and how they're all sort of exacerbated by various climate effects, and why it's so important for academics to play a big role in this, because there's really parts of these things that we don't really understand the problems even fully, let alone the solutions. So there is a lot to think about. And so from my own background, I can tell you, when I started out at the University of Texas at El Paso, we're working on water systems like the Rio Grande and Hueco Bolson aquifers, where there's simply not enough water to go around for that region. And that's, I guess, typical of the desert Southwest in the US and other places around the world. There's just not enough water. So what do you do in these sorts of situations? So the solutions are a little different in different places. I mean, here in the desert Southwest, you're looking at a lot of situations where you have to think about conservation of water and water reuse. So water treatment and water reuse is a big thing. Of course, certainly climate really exacerbates the situation because it's dry, there's a lot of evaporation, and you're losing water resources as these areas become even more arid. And then moving into my time at UL Lafayette, we were looking at very different problems. You had coastal water issues. It turns out, even in these areas around the coast, from the Gulf Coast of Texas all the way through the southeastern coastal areas, the coastal lowlands aquifer systems are being overdrafted tremendously in some areas. So we're actually over pumping groundwater along these coastal areas, whereas at the same time, particularly when you reach Louisiana and eastward, there's a ton of rain that they get there every year, sometimes too much rain. And so the problems there are, how do you deal with climate change impacts on flooding, where you have bigger, stronger rain events, perhaps more or stronger hurricanes in some instances, where the land gets inundated with these waters, and the management techniques for surface water basically to get rid of the water as fast as possible to prevent flooding. But at the same time, you're overusing the groundwater system. So there's a lot of water management things that can be done in these areas that maybe you couldn't do in the desert Southwest. So that's another one. And then, of course, as you move up into the Midwest, you've got a whole nother set of problems that are all linked, but also dissimilar in that you've got different kinds of agriculture, some of it irrigated agriculture, some of it not, which will be threatened by climate with this, I guess you could use the term, which I've heard before, called weather whiplash, where you're going to have longer droughts, which are predicted due to climate change, and more and intense bouts of rain. And so you're going to be going back and forth between these conditions. So how do you mitigate that? And then, of course, you have our major river systems, and they go through cities. And so how do you mitigate flooding in these cities that might impact transportation systems, supply chains, and other things? So all of these problems, we don't even really know how they're going to be impacted by climate fully. So academics has a major role to play there and understanding it, but not only understanding that, but the solution. So that's my intro, and I'll just put a pin in that there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, David. So our third panelist for today is SLU's own Dr. Amanda Cox. Dr. Cox is the director of the Water Institute, and you've been hearing from her throughout the sessions today. And she's also an associate professor of civil engineering. Her research activities cover a very wide range of topics related to water movement, and she's conducted studies on river engineering, sediment transport, urban drainage, stream restoration, bridge pier scour, hydraulic structures, and erosion control. Amanda uses a variety of research models or research methods, including numerical simulations, physical modeling, direct field measurements, and remote sensing. And through her research, Dr. Cox applies advanced technology in novel ways, which you heard a little bit about earlier in today's session, to observe and model water and sediment flow behavior. So, Amanda, would you like to tell us a little bit more about your expertise and your experiences with water?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Liz. First, I'd like to just highlight, as Liz mentioned, I'm the director of the Water Institute, and I kind of want to highlight the Water Institute in the context of this panel. So we launched in June of 2020, and our mission is advancing water innovation to serve humanity. The research and outreach that we conduct at the Water Institute focuses on 3 critical areas. Developing clean water access at home and in the developing world, protecting aquatic ecosystems, and improving water infrastructure to address some key needs for our communities, such as securing water supplies and reducing the impacts of natural or water-related natural disasters. And if we think of these 3 areas in the context of climate change, without considering climate change, they're significantly interconnected. So, right, our infrastructure is impacting our environment, is impacting our communities, there are community needs. So there are a lot of various facets of water resources. And then when you add climate change challenges on top of that, it really just makes it even more difficult and more problems and challenges that we need to try to address. One of the things that the Water Institute focuses on is interdisciplinary research and outreach. And so we have experts in multiple fields, from science and engineering to policy, economics, and public health and social justice. And the intent for the Water Institute is to bring together those experts to help address some of those most critical and persistent issues that we have. With respect to climate change, some of the projects that we currently have going on related there, Alejandra Botero Acosta, she's a postdoctoral fellow, presented on the NSF Hydroclimate project, which is the SLU lead for that is Jason Knopf. He's in biology, and that project focuses on forecasting changes in stream flow and stream temperature based on different climate change scenarios and how that impacts aquatic habitat. I presented on a project that looks at estimating reservoir sedimentation using machine learning methods, which is going to provide a really valuable tool to look at the impact of climate change on the capacity of our reservoirs throughout the country. So we've got a lot of exciting projects going on that are helping to address some of those issues. I'll highlight just one other project of mine, actually 2 other projects of mine. One is a collaborative project funded by the National Science Foundation, and we're looking to develop an online portal with for river morphology data. So these are like river survey data, geometry data, bed material data, and tools to help analyze those. And these can be used in assessing climate change impacts. And then another project that I have is with the Army Corps of Engineers, and we're working to develop a computer model that will forecast changes in river shape and form and behavior over time. And I presented on that project last year. It's an ongoing project, but that's going to be a really valuable tool to look at the impact or evaluate the potential impacts of climate change on river behavior over time. And I'll stop there and I'll hand it back to you, Les. Thanks for the introduction.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Amanda. So I'd now like to bring all of our panelists back for a discussion. We have a few initial questions that we want to use to start the conversation, and then we're going to spend the remaining time on audience questions. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to use the Q&A function on the right-hand side of your screen. I will read those off to the panelists when we get to the audience question portion of the panel. And if you have a question for a specific panelist, please feel free to put that panelist name into the Q&A so that we know who to direct that question to. So to get us started, I want to begin with our first question, which is in your specific area of work and expertise, where do you see climate change impacting water quality and or infrastructure? And so to get us started, David, would you like to answer that question?
Sure. It's an area that I have a lot of interest in, so I'd be happy to try. So I think really when most people think about climate change and water resources, you immediately jump to sort of the physical nature of water, where you're going to get less rain in one area and maybe more rain in another area, and these sorts of features, which are obviously very important. They're part of what controls the quantity of our water. But at the same time, climate can have a direct impact or an indirect impact on the quality of water. And that in turn actually influences how much water we have available. So if you take some water that was available out of production because it's no longer useful to us unless we clean it, and that costs a lot of money sometimes, then we have less water available in total. And that's particularly important in regions that are suffering from a lack of fresh water in the first place. So some of the ways climate can impact this water quality directly, certainly increased evaporation in reservoirs and things of this nature, and evaporation in various flood irrigation scenarios. But changes in rainfall directly can impact the pH of water systems, groundwater, surface water interactions, which can impact the redox conditions of groundwater systems. For example, there's been some recent work that's shown that arsenic levels can be increased by climate change in some instances because of these features. But then more importantly, really, there's a secondary effect. It's basically, what do we do sometimes when climate's impacting us? So if there's not enough water flowing in our streams or in our reservoirs, the first thing that we'll do is we'll start pumping more groundwater, which sometimes isn't very sustainable. So it's an indirect climate effect. But when we do this, that leads to subsidence of the land. So basically, you're taking the water out of the pore spaces, and they're filled with air, and they begin to collapse. So we actually lose some of the elevation of land in some cases. And then in addition, and I think this is actually the biggest, or certainly arguably the biggest chemical change associated with climate, and that's salinization or getting more salty water. So this happens, sort of in a direct fashion along the coastlines, because the hydraulic head of the groundwater that's inland is diminished, and so it allows water from the coasts to seep into these aquifer systems and move landward. And so some of these wells that might be servicing major cities that used to be fresh water are starting to become saltwater because of those reasons. And then it's not a problem that's just on the coast. Inland, there were a couple studies over the last few years that have shown, on average, our drinking water has become saltier, even in the United States over the last several decades. And the reason for that is, as you go deeper into the earth, the water tends to be a little bit more salty and becomes brackish, and very deep it becomes brines and very salty. And so what's happened is we've used up a lot of the near surface fresh water, and we're moving to deeper water sources, which have more salts associated with them. And then certainly sometimes over pumping in the near surface can draw water from below up as well. So this salinization has become a major issue. And certainly the other thing about water quality to realize, and for some reasons as scientists, you don't realize this all the time unless you're into the economic aspects, and I certainly wasn't. But really, it's an economic problem more than anything else, because you can always treat water that's not very good and make it good again. But it costs a lot of money and a lot of energy to do so. And desalinization is one of those things that is almost the most expensive thing you can do. I know from my work in El Paso, where they have the largest inland desalinization plant in the world, that I wager that there's going to probably be another dozen plants like that, maybe even in the US in the next 50 years, because we're going to be running out of water that's not salty. So I'll stop there and let others address that as well.
Thank you so much for your insight, David. Jason, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I'm a technology researcher. So one thing I want to add is desalination is expensive, but it started to become cheaper. So that's owing to the technology development, to the new membrane evolvement. But in general, it's still expensive. So since I'm working on water pollution, I want to further elaborate how climate change really affects the water quality, as David mentioned. So one example I think everyone is aware of is algal blooming, so eutrophication. So that's a very direct effect. The temperature become warmer. Those small guys, microalgae, just grow crazily, and that's kind of the green color we don't want to see. So we want to see everything green, but not everything green. So that's also related to the water pollution. That's related to the over discharge release of the nutrient compounds like phosphorus and nitrogen. So that's a part of the mission for a typical wastewater treatment plant, is to reduce the concentration of those major nutrient elements that can cause eutrophication. Obviously, climate change just accelerate this process. Another point I want to mention is the effect is a double direction. So climate change affects water, and sometimes, not sometimes, it's always, and the water process can also affect climate change. So I'm not talking about the general water process. Again, I'm an engineer researcher. I'm looking at treatment side. So one example is during wastewater treatment, some greenhouse gas compounds released, not just CO2. We know CO2 is a major greenhouse gas compounds. There's other stronger greenhouse gas compounds like nitric oxide, which is very unique and largely released from a wastewater treatment process through anaerobic treatment. It's part of the denitrification process. So wastewater treatment process is considered a major source of nitric oxide for the greenhouse gas. So there is kind of a two-way effect, and we do need to improve our understanding and how we can really control really the two-way effect.
Great, thank you. Amanda, do you have anything you want to add to this question?
Sure. Yeah, so David and Jason focused on water quality and groundwater, and I'm going to try to talk about it from a surface water perspective, add that element to it. So I would say from surface water, that hydrologic uncertainty and increased variability in precipitation and stream flows is a major concern. Alejandro presented yesterday on the hydroclimate project, where they're forecasting changes in stream flow and temperature. These stream flow changes can put some significant additional stressors on our infrastructure. And one specific example is our combined sewer system here in St. Louis, right? So we expect to see increased flood frequency and flood intensity through climate change. So that can impact a lot of our infrastructure systems. So the combined sewer system, levee systems, and even our transportation systems and infrastructure. And then from a river morphology perspective, variations in river and stream flows can impact channel stability. And what that means is it can cause adverse erosion and sedimentation patterns within river systems. And this can cause rivers to change in ways that are undesirable, like lateral migration or significant degradation that can cause adjacent loss of land. And that sedimentation increase is also a considerable water quality factor as well. So just from the the stream flows, river flows, the changes in flow variability and increases in intensities can really cause problems throughout these river systems and cause instability that can, from there, cause a lot more problems throughout the entire system. Yeah, I think I'll stop there, but that's what I wanted to highlight is from the surface water perspective.
Thanks, Amanda. So the next question I have for the panel is a series of related questions about how what the role of academia is. So as you can see from our audience at the summit today and yesterday, there are a lot of different sectors and organizations working to address impacts of climate change on our water resources. So what do you view the role of academic institutions and research in this space? What is the impact you hope that your research and academic centers will have? And so, in other words, how do academic activity and related research translate into real world impact when we're talking about water and climate change? So, Jason, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say that academic play a very important role here. So obviously, we're all professors. We want to highlight our work. In my view, academia have two major functions. So the first is where it generates new knowledge. And the question is how we're going to do with the new knowledge, how we're going to use it. There are a few application directions. For instance, we can develop technologies. So a lot of new technologies coming from fundamental research. Again, speaking of wastewater treatment, in the past 2 decades, the new technology like Anamox, aerobic granular sludge, all coming from lab. So initially, people driven by curiosity and discover something, and eventually evolved to become a full-scale technology, start to show the great effects of the lower energy consumption and the great removal of the targeted contaminants. So we can look at the technology development. The second application of the new knowledge is we can help policymaker. Right? So we provide information, help to make. So we probably won't be able to make policy directly, but we can provide knowledge input. One example is in recent year PFAS. Especially in the United States, it's a very hot topic. It's a toxic compound. It can cause cancer, but we need the data. We need the information for lawmakers to make a decision. What is the minimal concentration or the highest concentration? How are we going to deal with that? So they all need the knowledge. And then we also provide the knowledge to the practical side, obviously for the wastewater utility, drinking water utility, and consulting companies, technology companies, they need this type of information to guide their operation and the business operation. So the third application of the new knowledge is, I think, is the public education. So the general public, they don't have to understand the problem as deep as us, but they do need to understand the problem. They need to get a better understanding of the particular environmental issue, water, climate change. So we get a new knowledge from research, and we should disseminate and convey the knowledge to the general public through the K-12 education and other public platform to really promote awareness of the important issue. So that's the first role of the academic, in my view, is generate knowledge. The second role is we're not going to do this just by several of us here as professors, right? We need more people. So the second role, I think, is to train next generation engineer and scientist, right? So we cultivate this culture, manpower, and send them to everywhere. So they don't have to always do research. They can be in the public section, they can be in the private section, but they have the knowledge. They continue generating new knowledge and doing what we're doing. So in this way, we're really increase the impact of academic and also the research knowledge.
Thanks so much, Jason. Amanda, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Sure. Yeah. So what I see the role of academia here is a key role is to provide serve as a resource for the different sectors, help bring innovative and effective approaches to their challenges. At the Water Institute, we're currently working with about 20 organizations that either sponsor or collaborate on various projects. And these include agencies like the National Science Foundation, the Army Corps of Engineers, and Nature Conservancy. And many of these research projects are quite applied and have direct impacts on our communities. I would say for my personal research, some of the key things that I'm focused on are providing data access and modeling tools that engineers and practitioners and scientists can use in their work every day to help make decisions for the future. So I think that's a really key role, is to provide those tools to enable those industry professionals. Also, Jason mentioned training our next generation of engineers and scientists and other industry professionals. As I mentioned, I used some statistics. We had over the past couple of years 20 undergraduate students that did research or research assistants with us at the Water Institute. We had 12 graduate students. So I think it's really critical that we play that critical role in providing that talent and recruiting students and helping develop that pool of the next generation of industry professionals. And then the last thing that I'll highlight is the role in terms of community engagement. And so we really, at the Water Institute, are trying to work local, regional, and national communities and provide platforms for us to share ideas and connect and see what other folks are working on through activities like the SLU Summit for Water that we've had. This is our third annual one. We've also had various webinars and in-person seminars, but I think this is also kind of a critical role in academia to help connect people and serve as a hub for those types of discussions.
Excellent. Thanks, Amanda. David, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on this topic.
Sure. I'd echo what everyone said. I think those are really important roles for academia. Two things that just sort of popped into my head about why academics is suited to help play these roles. So one is when you think about various agencies that we might have that are regulatory sorts of agencies that are out there, they tend to have people who are really good at the thing that they're working at. So scientists, engineers who know water in some way or what have you. But what academics also has is that we have teams of people in different disciplines set up to do things. So we have, maybe sociology people and economics people and hydrology people and so forth. And so we, if we did it well, could bring teams of people to look at a problem sort of comprehensively in a 360-degree view, which I think is difficult for a lot of other agencies and entities to do sometimes. In addition to that, the other thing, and I can say this from experience working with it in the USGS and other agencies a little bit, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, but sometimes the general public or a fraction of the general public may not want to interface with the federal government too much on various things. They think that there's various political motivations and all these other things. So when solutions are presented, they're wary of them sometimes. So I think academics can play a role in being an independent group that's providing solutions that I think sometimes are more easy for the public to buy into, because they do have that sort of independent scientific view, I think. So those are two things I could add on. Thanks.
Thank you, David. So the next question I have relates a little bit to what David just mentioned. But one of the things I think is a common challenge that we face in the academic environment is navigating among our various silos, both within the university and between our universities and the broader community beyond our campuses. So my question is, how are you working to break down these silos and build collegiate and community collaborations for greater impact? And what opportunities do you see for these types of cross-sector collaborations? So I'll start off with you, Amanda.
Yeah, this is a really important question. One of the key components of the Water Institute is to promote interdisciplinary collaboration. That was like one of the main reasons why we developed this. We had several faculty at the university in different areas that were working, like mentioned, in silos, and we are starting to collaborate informally, and this was a way to sort of formalize those collaborations and provide resources behind that. So I would say, with the SLU and other institutions as well, putting resources behind that to help develop those. What we know is that these interdisciplinary approaches are absolutely necessary to address these issues. And it's already been mentioned a couple of times, but it goes beyond the science and engineering. These solutions that are going to be viable, innovative, effective, have to address the policy aspects, the economical aspects, and the public health and social justice components as well. And so this is something that I hope that we'll see more of in the future, and that we're definitely trying to do that through the Water Institute and incentivize those types of collaborations. We have primary and associated investigators through the Institute in many of the sciences, engineering, but we also have folks in public health, social justice, urban planning and development, and folks from the School of Education, the School of Law, and Theological Studies. So our next two presentations, actually, the first one from Dr. Tobias Winwright, he's going to be focusing on the value of water and religion, and Dr. Danielle Davis, who's going to be presenting on teaching water in the virtual middle school environment. So, this is a key thing that we're trying to foster and cultivate here at SLU and the Water Institute. And I'll also say that we have really tremendous faculty within the region at SLU, WashU, Missouri S&T. Like, we have a really exceptional group of faculty working in water resources. And we have been actively working to develop some broad collaborations within these groups.
Thank you so much, Amanda. David, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Well, again, I agree with Amanda. I think, there are some good things going on in this area. I think, SLU and other institutions are doing some of these things the right way. I think it reminds me back when I had some conversations at the National Science Foundation, 5-10 years ago, when they were developing some of these calls like water sustainability and climate and food energy water nexus that demand these interdisciplinary approaches to actually be successful in getting those grants. But what they were finding is that participation was, at least at first, was sort of hard to come by because there's sort of some institutional things that need to be overcome. So I'd say one of the major factors is making sure institutions value this interdisciplinary research. And what I mean by that is, some early career faculty, for example, still get the advice, don't participate in these because it will pull you away from other things that will allow you to be successful in your tenure and promotion. And maybe this isn't what you want to focus on right now. And I think that's the wrong advice in some ways. I can go back to an example of this thinking. At one point at another institution, I was a department chair. We had somebody going up for promotion from associate to full professor, and there became sort of an argument with the dean about a paper they published in Nature. But what the argument was is that they were one of, I think, 15 authors on this paper in Nature, and the dean, for some reason, saw that as a negative, and that this paper then shouldn't count towards tenure because they didn't really do it themselves, right? Whereas you could take the opposite view, which I think I certainly did at this, and it shows you have somebody on your team who's able to collaborate with a really great group of people and do some cutting edge science. So I think that's the kind of thing that institutions have to value before it becomes commonplace. And I think it's becoming so, but still, unfortunately, not maybe fully so. Thanks.
Thank you so much, David. Jason, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Well, I think first of all, we need to meet and chat. So obviously the past 2 years, the pandemic has made this a little bit difficult. I hope next year, the Water Summit, we can really sit together and chat. I think having dialogue, communication is really important. to start this type of research, not just within academic, across the academic, with practical side, with government entity. So we need to chat first. Second, I think we need to understand the need from the other side. It's just like, for instance, when I work with a wastewater utility or consulting company, I'm not just going to sell my fancy research. That's probably not something they are interested in. So we need to understand what they're interested in, rather than just keep talking about our own stuff. And this needs that more communication, dialogue, and more interactions again. So after that, I think we should start as academic institutes. We should start from local. I know it's nice to have a national, international vision, but it's more important we start from regional. So St. Louis is a big region, right? It's not a huge, but a relatively big region. We have a lot of companies here. We have a lot of public section here. So there's a lot of work we can do for the institution in this region. So I praise the efforts by SLU Water Institution. I try to have something similar here at WashU by establishing this Center for Water Innovation. So our CWI have the partner like Anheuser-Busch, American Bottom Wastewater Treatment Plant, and the City of St. Louis Water Division. So we try to work with the regional partners and understand their need and see how our research can help to address their problem, or worse-wise, how they can help us to identify the research issue. One example is one of my colleagues is working on the detection of pathogens in the drinking water utility. So she desperately needs the partnership like Missouri American Water and City of St. Louis Water Division. So our center helped her to establish this contact so that she can start this type of research, and the findings from her research can also provide feedback to both Missouri American Water and City of St. Louis Water Utility to help them to understand their water problem and possibly for improving the operation. I think, as what I said, we need to talk first, then understand their problem, and let's start from region. Then we can probably go bigger.
Thank you so much, Jason. My last question for the panel today is, we have some students in the audience, both at the college level, but also some at the high school level. What advice do you have for students who are considering pursuing studies and/or careers in water and environmental sectors? And Jason, I know we just left off with you, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on this topic.
Well, okay, so we always want to pursue students. It's just come to the civil engineer, come to the environment engineer, and pursue a career in water. I think there are two things I like to talk to prospective students, either for graduate school or for undergraduate study. Is first, a strong passion. This is very likely something you're gonna work on for many years. It's okay. It's free. You can change your career path later on, but you're gonna spend a decent amount of time on this. So you should have a strong passion on this subject. So that needs you to understand it. Second thing is you should have a good understanding of reality. My meaning of that is, at WashU, I'm in a department of a chemical engineer and an environmental engineer together. So we're a chemical environmental engineer together. I always tell undergraduate students, see, I have to tell you the truth. When you graduate, if you choose the environmental engineer, your salary gonna be lower than chemical engineer. That's just unfortunately the reality. So I don't want to say all the good things to students and then they realize that that's not really what it is. So I hope students have strong passion and they want to pursue that career for many years, and at the same time understand some reality. Obviously, we're still understanding reality at this age of the life, but at least as a professor, we can try to bring them some reality, help them to choose.
Thank you so much, Jason. David, what are your thoughts on this topic?
I think, one thing I guess bit of advice I give to students is that there's just a ton of entry points into looking at water. So, you want to get a background in something, but it can be a lot of things to get into water, from sciences and biology, geology. I always recommend geology since I am a geologist, but certainly engineering, but also other areas, economics, policy. There's law. You can get into water as well. So there's a ton of entry points out there. So I think you do it and like Jason said, you have the passion. And then the other bit of advice would be get involved. And so get involved in the community, doing something with water or with research in the academic institution that has something to do with water. And I think you'd be sort of set going along that sort of pathway. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Amanda, what are your thoughts for students?
Yeah, my comment to this question is always been to find a mentor. So, somebody is in a position or a field that you would like to reach. So most professors and industry professionals would be very delighted to give you advice. They can share with you their career trajectory, the challenges and the opportunities that they've had. They can be a tremendous resource. And like, as I mentioned, most of them are very happy to share their experiences with you and give you advice. So that would be my first suggestion, is to start there. I've had several mentors throughout my career that I just wouldn't be where I'm at without their guidance and direction. And that would be my big piece of advice.
Thanks, Amanda. So now we want to open the platform up to audience questions. And so if you have a question for our panel, please type it into the Q&A portion of your screen on the right-hand side. And if you have a specific panelist who you would like to ask a question to, please add that panelist's name in your question. While we're waiting for the audience's questions to come in, I'm curious, Amanda, going back to your comment about experiences with mentors, if the panel could elaborate just on some of those experiences, since we've been talking about students interfacing with faculty and then moving into sectors related to water and climate, if there are any particular experiences that the panel had that were particularly enlightening and kind of helped them move on in the trajectory that they've moved into. So Amanda, since you kind of brought up that topic, maybe start with you.
Yeah, excellent. I'll just say, whenever I was in college, I really wasn't sure, what I wanted to do after I graduated. And really until my senior year, whenever I had an opportunity to work directly with some professors helping out with some of the laboratories. And so I went to the University of Missouri in Columbia, and my professor at the time that I worked with, his name was Dr. Lee Payton, and he was just tremendously helpful whenever I started looking for considering graduate school. He knew exactly the best programs for water resources and what the application process was, and he helped guide me through that entire process. So he was really critical. And then, as all of us professors know, we all have mentors while we're in graduate school that, their feedback and advice is really incredible as well. So I would say while I was at Colorado State, one of the biggest mentors that I had there was Dr. Stephen Abt. And he wasn't my advisor, but he was on both of my committees, and he was just really tremendously helpful in getting especially in the applying for professor positions at different universities. And so I've never really had somebody like that I went to for advice say, no, thanks, I don't want to give you any advice. So it's almost flattering to be asked for advice. So I would just strongly encourage it, and I'll let others speak to their experiences.
Jason, do you have any input on this topic?
Well, I encourage students to go outside classroom. It's a bit kind of I don't know, it's not awkward to say that, or because on one side I do want students, because as engineering students they should have a strong knowledge base, right? Engineering course is a little bit tough to some degree, but at the same time, because it's water, climate change is really interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary work, they need to see different things. They need to come to events like SLU Summit. They need to go to a regional conference and different workshop to hear different opinion, different thoughts. I think this is really important. And one thing I think for students, if they're thinking about a career path, one thing they can do is do an internship. So spend 3 months in a consulting company or at water wastewater utility and experience different work. That can be really helpful.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. And David, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly had people who've mentored me and helped a lot along the way. I don't want to try and list them out too much. I'll say, when I started my career path, I'm a geochemist by training, and I kind of got more into the water resources over time. And there's a point in my career I was doing really very fundamental research, and sort of analytical chemistry type research. And then I switched. Someone sort of showed me some of the things they were doing in the water resources, and I sort of switched to do more applied work and look at the water resources a lot more. And what I liked about it immediately, what drew me to it, was for the first time, it became really, really easy to tell people why what I'm doing is important as a scientist. So as a fundamental scientist looking at trying to develop the systematics of a new isotopic system that only about 50 people might use for very specific reasons, it was hard to describe why that was so important sometimes, and it had its importance. But I think almost everyone understands why water resources are really important and why we need to pay attention to them through climate change and so forth. So I like being in that sort of an area. I will say one thing that also helped me a lot in my career, and this probably goes to Jason's point about internships, is working for 3 years in environmental consulting on water-related projects. And so you learn a lot more than you might simply being in academics by understanding, again, something Jason said earlier, the problems that people are actually trying to solve in real life sometimes. So not just sort of the theoretical, but the down-to-earth contaminated sites and things of that nature. So those are just a couple thoughts about what sort of helped me along my career pathway.
Thank you, David. I haven't seen any questions from the audience yet, so I suppose if there are any thoughts you guys have wrapping up on this topic of academia and how it interfaces with these topics of climate change and water resources, I'm happy to hear from the panelists on that topic.
Yeah, I think this type of dialogue is great. Really help us to understand each other and stimulate more thoughts. And beyond the dialogue, I do think we need action items. So when I meet with collaborator or students, I think after each meeting, what is our action items? So I think that's really can really continue the effort rather than after the dialogue, then we're gonna meet the next year. So I think this is something we need to think about. What is the action item? What is more realistic action items to address this issue from different level? We don't have to really come up with a solution to address the whole world problem. If we can, that would be great, but most likely not. And at a different level, we can do something. So I think we should invest more time and effort into that.
That's a great point. David, do you have any concluding thoughts about the topic for the panel?
I mean, not anything too noteworthy. I think you've exhausted all my thinking for today, but I will sort of again echo Jason's thoughts there. I mean, it would be sort of neat because I think what we're doing here in this panel is doing a little bit of some of the things we talked about before, like breaking down the silos and getting information out there and talking amongst ourselves and all this kind of stuff. So I think we're doing a little bit of that, but then maybe coming up with through this sort of a process or an extension of it, 2 or 3 problems that maybe we could look at addressing specifically, like those take-home points or action items might be a fun thing to look at too.
Thank you, David. Amanda, do you have any final thoughts about this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I will just echo what David and Jason had said. I think there's a lot of opportunity for our universities here within the region have such excellent faculty in this area. There's such tremendous potential for collaboration and to do some really important advancements here. And so to continue those efforts and try to make meaningful progress in those fields. And as Jason said, it's really important to understand what the actual problems are as opposed to what we would prefer to be working on. And that's kind of the key aspect whenever we're looking at, really what are the most critical needs for our communities, and then trying to form the best teams around those issues to address those problems.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And I really want to thank the entire panel today. Jason, David, Amanda, you have had some very insightful comments about this topic on academia and how it interfaces with climate and water resources. And so I really want to thank you for joining our panel today. I also want to thank the audience for attending, and we really hope that you've enjoyed the discussion that we've had about this topic. We're going to be back momentarily for our next set of research presentations beginning at 3:30 with Dr. Tobias Winwright, who will be presenting the value of water in religion and Catholic social teaching. And then at 4 p.m., we'll have Dr. Danielle Joy Davis and her students talking about teaching about water in a virtual middle school context. So again, I want to thank all the panelists and for their insightful thoughts throughout the session today. And I hope to see everyone in the remaining events for the summit. So we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Liz.